No, this video won't be about that either. If you've seen my previous video, you'll know that I recently divorced myself from my long-standing Apple TV relationship. This incidentally forced me to find a new home for all of my connected devices, as with the departure of said Apple TV, I also left Apple's HomeKit. Enter Home Assistant, a long-standing, free and open-source alternative capable of doing exactly that and way more. And to control it, I got the Sanytron Astrion, a $180 smart remote designed specifically for it. And combined, they almost drove me towards a second divorce, because they just wouldn't work together. That is until I finally figured out what I did wrong. And it's not embarrassing at all. Full disclosure, Sanytron, which sounds like the TV brand from that one Simpsons episode,
Zorny!
sent me the remote for review. But as usual, they neither paid nor saw it in advance or had any influence over it. They did give me tech support though. So strap in as we hit play. Wait a second, there's no button. Oh yeah, that touchscreen, right. Just to get this out of my way, the goal of this migration is the same as always. The never-ending quest to improve one's home entertainment by, instead of enjoying said home entertainment, spending an exorbitant amount of time trying to improve it. This is more than just a migration and hardware fetishism though, it includes a particular feature I'm very keen on achieving. Automated lighting depending on what type of media I am watching, including triggering it as soon as the credits start rolling. You know, like in a theater. Now, if this alluring combination of premises didn't make you want to swipe right, I don't know what will. So let's begin with Home Assistant, which, just in case you've never heard of, is like Apple's HomeKit and so much more. It's a hub where you can connect all of your smart devices in order to control and program automations for. Because of its open source nature though, there's a large and active community surrounding it with lots and lots of contributions and add-ons you can install on top of it. And just like HomeKit, it needs a hardware base to operate out from. For my needs, I chose my TrueNAS server. You don't need a full-blown NAS though. The list of compatible hardware is long and goes down to some quite manageable devices. You can also take the official route and get a licensed kit from Home Assistant themselves, for more of an out-of-the-box experience. Regardless of where you end up installing it though, once it's been set up, you'll be able to access and configure it via the browser or the mobile companion app. For the sake of time, I won't get into details on how to configure all of your devices, but also because it's pretty straightforward in most cases. Just for full transparency though, all of my devices had official Home Assistant integrations. Yes, even the Apple TV, which is sticking around for demonstration purposes. After having all of these devices connected, it was time to configure the controls, and this is where the Sanytron Astrion remote comes into play. Right, the touchscreen. Well, technically all of that was a lie. You don't need any remote for any of this. Home Assistant can be entirely controlled by your smartphone. But as a true aspiring potato, I want to have the OG experience of holding a weighted and elongated object for a prolonged amount of time, which is easy in this case, as it's quite a comfortable hold thanks to its rounded off design on the back. The Astrion is, as mentioned, specifically designed for Home Assistant, meaning it won't actually work without it, which was very evident while I was still suffering from the issues I mentioned. You see, in order to connect the Astrion, you need to enter the IP address of Home Assistant into the remote's web interface. The Astrion then thought it was a reliable and stable relationship, while my router was under the impression that it was an open house. Which meant about 24 to 48 hours after the pairing, it handed out new addresses, breaking off any previous engagements. This left me separated from all of my devices, with an insufferable refusal to reconnect that no restart, no Wi-Fi reset would fix. Only a renewal of the WOWs did. Now, I'm not going to state how long I did this dance before I finally realized what was wrong. What I can say is that the original script of this video was a tad bit more negative. Frustration definitely reared its head. I've since gained 2 more brain cells, and now that I have 4 in total, my network is configured properly, with my router having entered an insufferable commitment until death do part. Anyway, now that you know this, you can avoid the fun nights out and go straight to total control, using ROS.
Yes?
No, not that one from Friends.
What?
But an integration called ROS Card for Home Assistant. Cards are a standard offering, but ROS cards give you a set of custom ones specifically designed for the Astrion remote. This is maintained by Sanytron, meaning we are reliant on their continued support in order for the remote to function, which might be a red flag for some. If you're looking for a looser relationship, you might want to check out the Unfolded Circle Remote 3, which I've made a video about a couple of months back. Back to the Astrion. Before we can collect all the cards, we need a home for them, which comes in the form of a dashboard. These two are native to Home Assistant, and you can use them to group various devices, services, and other things together. Within a dashboard, you also have views, which is sort of a subgrouping, if you will. For example, I have a dedicated dashboard for the remote, and a view for my media devices like my CoreELEC, TV and AV receiver, and a view for my lights and power switches. Within these views is where the individual ROS cards go. These are used to get the actual controls onto the remote itself. I will focus entirely on the TV card in this video, as it's the one to control media devices and because it's the primary one I actually use on a daily basis. There are more cards from Home Assistant and also from ROS cards, of course, but the former seem to get ignored by the remote, which unfortunately limits the functionality quite a bit, but it's not the only limitation there is. To show you these limitations, let's introduce the Astrion to the rest of the family, starting with the oldest, most stubborn member, the Apple TV, which has to be integrated into Home Assistant first, of course. Then it's time to add the very first TV card, which is unfortunately named Unnamed TV card for some reason.
What?
Then pick the remote model, in my case the HA100A, select Apple TV, give it a name, and Bob's your uncle. Then we have to select the application and the media player, which should react to the controls, which in both cases are the Apple TV. Then it's off to the individual key mappings, which is easy and totally up to you. Now this is where I got a little annoyed. It's the lack of any physical media controls, one I've attempted to communicate through my likely unsuccessful remarks. By default, the touchscreen handles this, but technically you can map it to one of the custom buttons which are found at the very bottom of the remote, but it's just not the same. But the important thing is the Apple TV is connected, mapped, and working surprisingly well. I would also like to praise something for a change and point out the really nice feeling D-pad. Although the clicks are fairly shallow, the near delay-free response on the screen made navigating a breeze. With one praise down, let's go back to complaining, because I found that the D-pad isn't physically distinguished enough from the surrounding buttons, making finding it in the dark a tad bit difficult, at least at first. Let's move on though. Next up is my Bravia TV, which runs Android, and the configuration for it was pretty much exactly the same as the Apple TV. Add a TV card, select the remote, pick Android TV this time, and then map the buttons through the remote version. The same prerequisites exist here as well, being that the TV has to be connected to Home Assistant first before you can do any of this. Remember, the remote doesn't connect directly to any device, it only connects to Home Assistant. Then it was time for CoreELEC, my main movie and TV show watching box, where the first step worked just the same. But when it was time to add the TV card, I was left with another limitation. Unfortunately, the controls weren't exposed for Kodi like they are for the Apple and Android TV, which meant I had to create them myself, which I suppose is a good opportunity to dive into the scriptable possibilities of Home Assistant. In order to get CoreELEC or Kodi controls mappable, I had to create a custom configuration file in the packages folder of the Home Assistant configuration, which I did straight from the web UI using an additional add-on called Studio Code Server. Technically you can do this directly from the file system, but I was again too lazy to get my butt up. You know, couch potato mode. Before adding the configuration though, you need to make sure that Home Assistant will actually know about this file. So inside your configuration YAML, which you can find in the root directory after connecting, add a Home Assistant block with packages pointing to that folder. Then create the file. In my case, I named it kodi_remote.yaml and began a prolonged trial and error session until I finally managed to get a command working. The script is pretty straightforward in hindsight. There's a key, an alias which carries the same name found in the UI later, followed by mode, which is set to queued so that rapid presses run one after another one instead of stepping on each other. Then there's the action, and more importantly the entity ID, which is for the target that should react to the command. And finding this took a lot longer than I'd like to admit. Even though I named my own integrations, I somehow managed to get this wrong multiple times in a row until I learned that you can look it up under Developer Tools and then States. Just search for Media Player, which lists all available media players and their respective names in the system. Lastly, there is the method, which is what Kodi is supposed to do. These commands were luckily well documented on Kodi's API page. With this last puzzle piece in place, I added all the commands I required, headed back to the remote dashboard and the CoreELEC TV card. Finally, the Kodi commands were showing and could be individually mapped to a physical button. And that's it. CoreELEC is finally controllable, just like the other two devices. But what if there's no integration for what you are trying to connect, or maybe the integration isn't as smooth? Well, that's where IR comes into play. Although the Astrion shipped with an IR blaster on board, it wasn't until June with the firmware version 1.2.0 that it got actually activated. Anyway, in order to get IR working just like with Roscard, you have to install something extra, this time an integration called Astrion Home, again through the community store via a GitHub link. Once installed, you can then go to the integration, where you can then begin adding your IR devices. Strangely, this is done through the configuration cog in the middle here, choosing IR and then the type of device and then the brand. There's a long list here, but don't be fooled. Some of these are actually empty, and even the ones that seem to have data don't have as much as you might think. Take Sony TVs for example. Mine acts up sometimes, and the best fix for it is turning it off and on again. Even though the TV can be controlled via the network, IR just seems more reliable. Like a good old punch in the face, it wakes up the TV good. Unfortunately, IR on the Astrion isn't as punchy, or at least not when it comes to Sony TVs. You see, none of the three available options have the power command included. Instead, all of them have two seemingly unrelated ones. Now, based on the documentation, you can add custom IR commands. However, none of the ones I tried worked. I then tried to look through the Astrion Home integrations files to see if there was anything in there, but I believe that it doesn't actually come shipped with any codes. Instead, I think they are actually loaded in whenever you're adding a new device through the UI. Meaning, adding new IR devices requires a lookup to a Sanytron database that, if unreachable, results in no commands. However, because we're using Home Assistant, this might not be as much of a dead end. Even though I have no experience with this, you could use something called Smart IR. It's a community integration for Home Assistant that comes with a rather sizable library of IR commands. The catch is that it doesn't use the Astrion's IR blaster, it needs its own, something like a Broadlink or ESP Home based device. Which does add another box to the pile, but it also gets you the one thing the Astrion can't do at all at the moment: learning IR commands straight from your old remote. I haven't gone down this particular rabbit hole myself, but just in case you're looking for an alternative solution, this might be worth checking out. If the device in question has a complete list though, it works beautifully, as was the case for my Onkyo AV receiver. Even though there is a full Home Assistant integration for it, I decided to use it via IR instead. Reason being that controlling volume and other features via the network introduced a sizable delay. And since the Onkyo is used globally, it doesn't need to know the context of what's going on. It just needs to adjust the volume, mute, and change the channels. This works great and incidentally also highlights a feature of the remote that I quite like: the ability to mix and match different control types within the same card. Now, if this didn't get your customization blood pumping, the next chapter might. It's time to talk about automation. You see, I like the theater experience a lot, and I want to get as close to it as possible, within the given confinements of my apartment, of course. That means I want the lights in my entire home to react to when I watch a movie or a TV show, to the absolute horror of the other inhabitants. For this to work, you always need to have smart lights set up, which I will, for the sake of time, skip over and go straight to the scenes, of which there are three: movies, TV shows, and bright. I want these scenes to be triggered whenever I play a movie, a TV show, and when one of those finishes, or if I hit pause in order to go to the bathroom. Which is a mortal sin, I know, but trade-offs had to be negotiated. I mean, I still have my floor-standing speakers, so I take the wins I can get. And finally, for movies specifically, once the end credits start rolling, the lights should turn back on, just like at the theater. Now, these took me an eternity to get working, but again, in hindsight, seem rather simple. Before I get into this, one thing worth knowing: you don't necessarily have to build any of this from scratch. Home Assistant has something called blueprints, which are essentially pre-made automations where you just fill in the blanks, and a few of them already cover the basic dim on play, brighten on pause routine. but I ended up building mine from scratch. For one, because I actually didn't know about them, and two, because I wanted different scenes depending on movies and TV shows, and to deal with the rather creative ways in which Kodi reports its states. What we essentially need is 3 automations and their respective triggers. For this we can leverage Kodi's integration into Home Assistant, which knows the state of Kodi whenever it is playing, paused or stopped. Upon these state changes, numerous additional conditions are then checked in order to determine whether or not a scene needs to be activated or not. For example, this is the TV show automation, which gets triggered when Kodi starts playing. It first waits for 6 seconds, then checks what type of media it is. If it is a TV show or an episode, it'll then trigger the scene, which is slightly less dim than the scene for movies. I kinda like it like this and even had a hardware remote configured for this in the past. Anyway, there's a lot of playing states here, but this is because it was quite a bit fiddly on how Kodi reported these state changes. In this next configuration, the living room bright scene is triggered on pause, off, idle and standby. Meaning even if I hit pause on the non-existent physical button, the lights change, making way for an unsanctioned bathroom break. What none of these automations consider is the time of day. During the night all of this makes sense, but you might want to hold off on these automations if it's bright and sunny outside. Luckily, this can easily be added via the UI, if so desired. The credits automation works a little differently. It uses Jellyfin's media segments as the trigger, meaning you need a Jellyfin server or similar, at least something that reports where the playhead is. For Jellyfin, this comes as an additional plugin, namely Intro Skipper. It basically uses those moments as a trigger in order to fire the bright scene automation, turning on the house lights whenever a movie is finishing. Of course, that's a lot of requirements, but if you've watched the video until now, you're probably in possession of at least one of these, with the Astrion being the most likely one, since it lacks a physical stop button. Overall, I'm very pleased with how everything turned out. Until I found out about my network issue, I was generally very split about all of this. The initial impressions weren't that great either. Take the remote's simple nature, especially compared to something like the unfolded Circle Remote 3. At first, I felt restricted. Then I realized I didn't actually need anything more than this. It makes the remote much more manageable. Heck, I don't even have automated shutters or an AC, for which there are dedicated buttons for. I would have liked media controls instead, but at least these can be remapped to a certain degree. For my primary goal of home entertainment though, and enjoying the occasional physical media, it is plenty. Is it $180 worth of plenty though?
I don't know.
Like any good relationship, it needs the occasional threesome. By which I mean, if the Astrion worked on its own, without Home Assistant, I wouldn't nearly have as much fun with it. Granted, the initial connection issues made the reliance on Home Assistant very apparent, but it also highlights something else. Resetting the remote took almost no time because nearly all of the configurations live inside Home Assistant. A hub which I found amazing in terms of what you can actually do with it, and because it's something I'm much more willing to rely on. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. Maybe this is the one. It finally makes me settle down. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're doing splendid and see you soon in the next one, where it's back to keyboards, a semi-affordable one for a change. Anyway, thank you so much. Bye.
I will think about the therapy.